The police found the man living in our walls. I've always lived in an old house. I've lived there for as long as I can remember. I'd always grown up hearing creaks and clunks and groans. I was always reassured by my parents that it was nothing, it was just because the house was old. I grew up constantly hearing these sounds, so much so that they became background noise. But as I grew older I became more aware of them. More aware of what noises were made by the house and which were made by the people living there. Now I've always been a light sleeper, so waking up in the night due to groans from the heating and creaks in the walls was a frequent occurrence. However, one night I woke up because of these sounds, like I always did, and was greeted with something else. I was 11 at the time, and a thud from inside the walls woke me up. I shot up in bed immediately, glancing around me, when I heard a single noise from the wall that would change my life forever. A knock. A single loud knock. My heart jumped into my throat. A single child. My parents' bedroom was across the hall, and this noise was coming from the wall adjacent to my bed. The opposite direction of my parents' bedroom. Followed by the knock was silence. Simple, eerie silence. Then footsteps. Then silence. I hesitantly walked towards the wall and placed my ear against it. Still silence. Then, a faint tapping. Like rain pattering outside. Except this rain was inside the wall. I remember screaming and my parents running into my room, only to tell me nothing was wrong. I couldn't say I entirely believed the situation myself, but I never slept the same again. Over the course of the next year, incidents about the walls were infrequent and random. I'd always loved singing, and whenever I did so too loudly, I would often be greeted by quick tapping from inside my wall. Until a year later, when I was awoken by knocking from my wall again. I ignored it and tried to get back to sleep, but shortly after the knocking finished I heard footsteps. They were louder than normal, more frantic. My eyes widened in disbelief. My heart pounded. Silence once again. Then, cutting the air like a knife, a short low-pitched laugh. I don't remember much after that. Apparently I blacked out and made a really loud thud when I hit the ground, so my parents got worried, came to check on me, then called an ambulance, and I got taken to the emergency room. While we were in the hospital, our neighbors apparently heard noises in the house, got worried and called the police. They arrived to find a man wandering the house armed with a shotgun. He was arrested and charged with trespassing, possession of a weapon without a correct license, assault of 2 police officers, and, what he later confessed in court to, conspiracy to murder. He had planned to kill us that night. Police searched the house and found that all the walls had been hollowed out, and the whole house was an intricate maze with several exits and entrances leading outside hidden all over the house, accompanied with 2-way mirrors, hidden cameras and peepholes. The man convicted had transformed the house the way it was, while the previous owner still lived there over the course of several years, while they were away on vacations and business trips back, waiting for the right family to move in. We moved house later that week. It's been 14 years, and I still remember that laugh vividly. And when I really can't sleep at night, I can always hear knocking in my walls. The death clock. I first saw the clock as a child in the hall at my grandfather's house. If I were pressed to explain why I even remember it, I would say it's because it never seemed to keep actual time, or at least not any time we humans know. All of this was quite strange, but strangest of all was whenever it struck the 12, without fail, someone in my family would die. First it was my Aunt Judy. To this day I can vividly remember sitting at the table sorting my baseball cards after lunch one afternoon and noticing the hand had finally struck 12 before rapidly spinning back around to 3. Around 5 minutes later, the home phone rang. It was the hospital. My aunt had been driving home from lunch when some maniac rammed into the side of her Jeep, killing her instantly. My grandfather fit the phone into the receiver with a sigh. "Well, I guess you're old enough now," my grandfather murmured, before sitting down across from me and explaining the clock's peculiar properties. According to him, his grandfather found it on the side of the road and picked it up, curious. Shortly after, however, he would come to fiercely regret it. He soon realized 3 things. Number 1, the clock would count down to the death of a random person in the family it belonged to. Number 2, if the family it belonged to died out completely, it would belong to the family of whosoever touched it next. Number 3, if you attempted to dispose of the clock, it would simply reappear back in one's home. Of course, being young and naive, I didn't believe him, holding in my mind that it was just a coincidence. But I was forced to accept reality 5 years later when the hand hit 12 again, this time killing my cousin via complications in his heart surgery. Without fail, year after year, the clock would reach 12 and someone would die. Eventually, death claimed my grandfather, and his will named me the sole inheritor of everything including the clock. Honestly, I wanted nothing to do with the thing, but no matter what I tried, the clock would simply reappear in my room. I could, of course, ignore it if not for one little thing, the ticking. The incessant reminder of all I've lost with every tock, tick, tock. Just ticking and ticking and ticking and ticking, leading to the eventual toll, its baritone chime driving me to madness. Day in and day out, almost as if taunting me, that scratchy metronome tick would pulse, getting louder and louder as it got closer to the bold 12 superimposed in its face like an executioner's hood. This thing has taken everything and everyone I ever cared for. Even when I met the love of my life, the moment we got married, the clock decreed her impending doom, stealing happiness from my reach yet again. Only now, I have no more family left. It's standing there mocking me still with that infuriating tick. It's 11:58. I live in a parallel universe where I only have one responsibility. We all have questions about the afterlife, and I was no exception. Not being very religious growing up, I struggled to decide on what I believed in. After I died, that changed. I was 24 when it happened, beginning what was supposed to be a successful career. I had been walking home after a long day, and while crossing the street I was hit by a powerful force. I turned my head and saw someone staring back at me from behind the wheel of a semi-truck. As I fell backwards, I watched the driver's eyes fill with remorse and listened to the screams of shocked bystanders. Only when my head hit the ground and I began to fade out of consciousness did I realize that I might not wake up again. I was gone far before the ambulance arrived, so there was nothing that could be done to save me. That's not why I'm writing this, though. I'm writing this to describe what happened after I woke up. Expecting to be in a hospital room, I was surprised to find myself back in my own bed. I glanced at the clock, 9:45. I laid there for a minute wondering how much sleep I had gotten before I remembered everything. The truck, the screams, the driver, it all came rushing back. I became even more confused as to why I was in my bed. After getting dressed, I headed to the bathroom to brush my teeth. I glanced at the mirror, and there was nobody staring back at me. I looked again, and confirmed that the only thing in the mirror was an empty room. Thinking I was just not seeing correctly, I hurriedly got ready for work and left. Only after seeing an empty driveway, where my car should be, did I realize that something was wrong. I noticed someone walking on the sidewalk nearby, so I described my car to them, and asked if they had seen it. "Oh, you must be new here," the stranger replied. "I guess I should give you a bit of information. Things are basically the same as they used to be for you, except there is no need to work. Also, there's just one rule for you to follow. Always behave when you're at the mirror. Have a good day." What do you mean by backquote used to be, I responded, and where am I? He didn't listen, though. The stranger simply continued walking, as if I had not said a word. I wondered what had happened to me, and where I was, and most of my questions were answered when a dog sprinted out of my front door, which I had left open. Huh, that kind of looks like Cody, I thought to myself before realizing that it actually was him. He circled around me before jumping up to try to lick my face, and then I knew I had been reunited with the dog that I had owned for 9 years. It was hard to process at first, but I soon grew accustomed to being in the afterlife. The man I had spoken to on my first day was right, it really was similar to my previous life. I started meeting some people and formed a group of friends. Something I noticed quite quickly is that nobody aged. Not even Cody had gotten any older than the day I entered this world. Everything was fine, except for the mirrors. The first time it happened I was petrified, but managed to survive. The thing is, there's a reason we don't have to work in the afterlife. It's because there is already important stuff to do. Around 3 days after my arrival, I was enjoying some time outside when suddenly I was standing in front of my bathroom mirror. On the other side was a much younger version of me. I don't know how, but a voice told me that I was to mimic the child's movements. He who I would later find out was a reincarnation of me, was moving in slow motion, so it was not too hard to copy his movements. I did so, and eventually he walked away from the mirror, and I was back outside. I questioned one of my friends about it, and got an explanation. That's the only responsibility you'll have here. If you don't copy the movements of the other person correctly, then there will be consequences. Whenever they are in front of a mirror, you will be moved there. If you fail to copy the movements correctly, they may notice it and begin to question things. That's why God has a rule in place. If you mess up, then 10 days later you will have to watch them die a horrible death before starting over with a new reincarnation. It's a lot to take in, but you get used to it, my friend told me. Yesterday, I messed up. Real world me had been making rapidly changing expressions at the mirror, probably trying to see if his reflection would respond correctly. I messed up on one of them, smiling just a second too late. He didn't seem to notice that I had broken the rule, and now he has to pay for it. He has 9 days left to live now, and I can't handle having to see myself die. I'm beginning to think that the reason people die is because their reflection makes a mistake. I may be wrong, but from what I've seen it is true. I don't know if anyone will be able to see this, but if you do, then take this as a warning. If your reflection is ever a little bit off, then you just might have 10 days left.